part 2 of Module 4. We're going to review slope and then talk about point slope formula of a line. So at the top, it has the slope formula, which there's a bunch of different ways to find slope. You can use the words rise over run, which is what we did in part 1. Delta, ooh, that's a typo. Delta y over delta x, change in y over the change in x, which is symbolized by y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. All right, that's when you're given two ordered pairs. We're going to review that right here. So don't, if you're having trouble remembering slope, this will review it for you. When I teach slope, I always tell students, if you need to, label your coordinates x and y. Now, it doesn't matter which one you call y1 and y2. Just go ahead and start with the same point. My default is for some reason to start with the right point, but you can start with any y value you want. To find the slope, you're going to take the y value, I'm going to start with 6 here, and you go minus the other y value, negative 5. Then you start with the same x value, negative 4, minus the first x value of 0. Well, 6 minus negative 5 turns into a plus, that's 11, and negative 4 minus 0 is negative 4. That would be your slope. Leave it in fraction form. Part B, if I have x and y, again, I like to start with the right point. So to find my slope here, I'm going to write that first y down, 8, minus the other y of 2. Start back with the right x, negative 1, minus 13. 8 minus 2 is 6. Negative 1 minus 13 is negative 14, and that fraction does simplify. They're both even, so I'm going to pull out a 2 and make it 3 over negative 7. And that'll be the second slope. All right, finally, the third one. Label your x and y. And again, I'm going to start right here. So I start with the first y, negative 5, and subtract this other y, negative 5, over 3 minus 8. Now, negative 5 minus negative 5 turns into a plus. And negative 5 plus 5 is 0, divided by negative 5, and 0 divided by anything is 0. Now, one thing you should remember from part 1, any line with a slope of 0 is going to be horizontal. Okay? Hopefully that reviews slope for you. We're going to hit slope again back in unit 7. So make sure you know this one, or module 7. Now let's talk about point slope form. Point slope form is a little bit different than the y equals mx plus b form. This is the formula for it. I think you've seen it before in geometry. Point slope form is useful when you're given a point and the slope. Right? So I tell you, you're on a line that has slope of something and passes through a point, or you're given 2 points. Okay? So here's how it works. Let's just jump into seeing how it works and reviewing that. You have an equation of a line you want to write that goes through the point negative 2, 5 and has a slope of negative 4. Now the negative 2 is your x value, so I'm going to put that on my line for x. The 5 is my y value. And the slope, negative 4, is my m. Now I have some fill in the blanks here to write an equation in point slope form, and then I'll review the pattern with you. The formula is y minus y1. So that y1 right there, the m and the x1, those are the 3 blanks that we have to fill in. The y1 is the 5. So y minus 5 is the first thing I'm going to write. After the equal sign, I write the slope. Here was negative 4. And then inside the parentheses, I write x minus the x value over there, which was negative 2. Now, what I mean by clean it up is we typically don't write minus and negative. So what we do write is we'll write y minus 5 equals negative 4 times x. Remember, minus and negative turns into a positive. Now, something I want to point out to you before we move on. Look at the signs here. The y has a sign of negative 5. The original y was positive. The x has a positive 2, and the original x was a negative 2. So one thing to remember is that the signs that you use in the point slope form are the opposite signs of what you had in the original point. All right, so what that means, I'll show you another one so we can see a little better what that means. I'm going to rewrite point slope form up here, just so you can reference it here while we're getting the hang of it again. We always start with a y. Now, I take the opposite of the y value from my ordered pair, right? We have an x and a y, so the opposite of positive 9 is negative 9. equals. I write my slope here, it's -8, that's the m. Then I have x, and I take the opposite of the x value, here would be -3. And that's the equation of the line. If you're not sure, I'll show you how to check it. Let me pull up actually, I'll just pull up Desmos here. I'll just show you this real quick. If I graph that line, y minus 9 equals, let's see, -8 times x minus 3. First of all, it shows me a line. I can check that it goes through the points I wanted. 3, 9, by plotting the point 3, 9. See how 3, 9 is on that line? And I could also count the slope, see if it went down 8 over 1. But you can check your work by using your calculator or Desmos here. All right, let's try number 3. So if I write my point slope form and start with a y, I do the opposite of the y value, which here would be +1, equals my slope times x, the opposite of the x coordinate. And those are lines written in point slope form. All right, now let's make it a little bit more work. So here I was just giving you 1 point and 1 slope, and it made it super easy to write point slope form. Next, I'm giving you 2 points to write point slope form. So I have points, I have multiple points to choose from, but I don't have the slope. So what you're going to do is you're going to need to use the slope formula like we did at the top of the page. So here you label your x's and your y's, and you find your slope. I'm going to start with the 2 here. 2 minus the other y value of 6, and I start with the x, 1 minus -3. Well, 2 minus 6 is -4, 1 minus -3 is a plus, and that simplifies to -1. That's my slope. Now, it does not matter which point you use. I'm going to use the first one to write my equation. I'll show you the other one though. So when I write that first equation, I'll have y. I'm going to take the opposite of 6 to be -6 equals my slope times x, the opposite of -3. And that's the first one, if I use the first point. If I decided to use the second point, here's what my equation would look like. Y minus 2 is -1 times x minus 1. They actually are the exact same line. If you solved the equations, like if you graphed them, it would be the same line. They just look a little bit different. All right, number 5. You can try on your own if you want. We're going to find the slope again. I'm going to have 1 minus the other y value equals -1 minus -2. 1 minus 3 is -2, and this turns into a positive. -1 plus 2 is 1. So my slope here is -2. All right, I'm going to write 2 equations again. I'm going to start with the first point. So if I wrote an equation here, I'd have y minus 3 equals the slope times the opposite of the x value. That's one of the lines. Now, the other equation, I could write it, if I chose to use the other point, would be y, the opposite of the y value, equals my slope times the opposite, x plus 1, which is the opposite of the x. Go ahead and flip your paper over. We're almost finished. Now this time, if I give you an equation, I want you to identify the point and the slope. So the slope is easy. That's the number in front of the parentheses. In A, that's 2/3. The point, remember you need an x and a y for a point. Well, the x, I look in the parentheses and I take the opposite of that value, -3. The y, I look next to the y and take the opposite of that value. So again, if I try it in B, the slope is the number in front of the parentheses. The point, the x is next to the x, so you do the opposite, and the y is next to the y, and you take the opposite there. All right, 2 more problems. So this one, very similar to 4 and 5 that we did on the front, except this time I'm not just writing my answer in point slope form, I need slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. So I have to go from point slope form into slope-intercept form. That's going to make it, if we were going to graph, easier to graph. All right, so let's first find the slope. That's what we need to do first. So here I take my y value. I'm going to start with 8 minus negative 28 over 3 minus negative 3. Those actually both turn into plus signs. And 8 plus 28 is 36. 3 plus 3 is 6. Simplifies to be 6 as my slope. Now, I'm going to only do this one time. So I'm going to pick the second point to use just because the numbers are smaller to write my point slope form. You could use the other point if you want. You will end up getting the same answer. So my point slope form is y. I'm going to do the opposite of 8, which is negative 8, equals my slope times x minus 3. Now, that's point slope. Now, in order to get y equals slope-intercept form, all I have to do is solve that equation for y. So I'm going to start by distributing. Keep the y minus 8 equals 6x minus 18, and add 8 to both sides. So your equation ends up being y equals 6x minus 10. And that's it. That's all it works. You have your point slope form and your slope-intercept. They make the exact same line. They just look different. All right, last problem. Let's do some modeling using point slope. It says you pull the plug from a bathtub. After 40 seconds, there's 13 gallons of water in the tub. After 60 seconds, there are 10 gallons left. At what rate is the tub draining? Well, rate, you should know, means the word slope. So somehow we have to find the slope here. And if you think about lines, the information given to you actually gives you some ordered pairs. If I wanted the x value, because if I look way down at the bottom, or I'm sorry, in B, it says you're going to have gallons as g as a function of time t. Basically what that means is you have ordered pairs that are going to be t comma g, just like x comma y. Okay? So if I know time is 40 seconds, that means the number of gallons associated with the tub at 40 seconds is 13. That's one ordered pair. The next ordered pair, well, after 60 seconds, the amount of gallons in the tub is 10. So I can use those points to find the slope. To do that, I'll start with 10 minus 13 over 60 minus 40. That gives me negative 3 over 20, which doesn't simplify any more than that. But if I use that, if I included units like it says to, that'd be that the tub is going down 3 gallons, right? That was the top, the y's, or the gallons, every 20 seconds. You're going down 3/20ths of a gallon per second, or 3 gallons every 20 seconds. Now let's write an equation. We're going to start in point slope, eventually get into slope-intercept form. So I have to do what I did back in number 7 here. I have to get point slope form and solve for y. All right, so instead of y, it says use g. So now g, let's see, which point do we want to use? Let's use 40, 13. Yeah, we can use 40, 13. So we'll take g minus the 13 equals my slope times time minus 40. Okay, those numbers, remember, 13 is gallons, that's why it goes with g, 40 and t go together. Now I have to solve it. I need my equation in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to solve this here. I have g minus 13 equals negative 3 over 20t. Negative 3 over 20 times negative 40. That would be positive 120 over 20, which is, negative 120 over 20, which is 60. Yeah. No, it's not. I can't do math. 6. Is that right? No. Plus 13 would give me, yes, it is right. I'm sorry. Here we go. It's been a long day. Plus 6, then I get g by itself by adding 13. And my equation ends up being the number of gallons equals negative 3 over 20t plus 19. Now, if you did that as y and x, it's okay. I did g and t because that's what the direction said, but if you use y and x, it's fine. You have y equals negative 3 over 20x plus 19. Last question. How many gallons were in the tub when you pulled the plug at time 0? Well, that is the same thing as saying how much gallons are in the bathtub when you start. So you could either put 0 in for t here, And if you evaluated 0 for t, the fraction would go away and you'd have 19 gallons. Or you could look at the equation and say, oh, they're asking me for the y-intercept. That's always the number on the end. Okay? So there you go. That is part 2 notes. If you want to do some mixed practice on point slope form or graphing, there is a mixed practice file and